Okay, so welcome to the fourth episode of our podcast, Sound Bites. BITES is a fun acronym that stands for Business, Innovation, Technology, Entrepreneurship, and Strategy. And I'm really excited to have this guest on the podcast because he checks so many of these boxes. Jake Tabbert, he's the Segmentation and Targeting Manager at Kohl's. Better title, he's a really good friend of ours. And so we're really excited to learn how he takes, the intersection of data and marketing and derives some meaningful value for the brands that he's worked with. So Jake, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks. Excited to be here.
Yeah.
I really appreciate having you on. It's been a long time. I haven't seen you in person in years, which is crazy.
Yeah.
It's weird to think about.
Maybe like 3 or 4 years, hey?
Yeah.
It's felt like 3 or 4 years for sure.
Yeah.
Everything sort of
for sure
slows down during COVID.
Derek, you still racing at the track, by the way?
Yeah. Over the last couple of years, again, since we haven't been able to do very much else, and that's effectively social distancing, I've been spending a lot of time at the racetrack. So it's pretty fun. I really enjoy that.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, so we want to talk through what you're up to now. But before we even get there, let's talk about the path from where you started to how you got to where you are now. How did you become the person that's driving data-driven insights for marketing organizations? What did that look like?
Sure, man. Yeah. So I guess I'll get into it. Let's see. I'll go back to my background is econometric modeling. But really, I was a history major coming out of the junior year, and was thinking, what the hell am I going to do with a history degree? So scrambled and quickly, got into econ, took econometrics, 301, fell in love with the topic, and then continued that through grad school at Marquette. And from there, I really just loved econometric modeling, loved the topic, loved kind of figuring out wow, you can differentiate the impact of all these different variables with this cool technique. Had no plan to get into analytics at all. So I didn't even really know analytics was a space while I was in school. So
you completely just you fell in love with the topic. You're this is just fascinating how you can connect A to B. And then after the fact, you realized this is an extremely interesting career. And then afterwards you realized I can tie this with marketing teams and do some really interesting stuff.
Yeah. I mean, all of that kind of it wasn't planned, right? You dive into topics and new jobs and you kind of make the connections as you go. So, I got hired as an intern at Roundy Supermarkets, a regional grocer out here in the Midwest, and just started doing customer analytics in their research and analytics group. So started doing some customer segmentation, using cluster analysis, and did some marketing mix modeling. And that was my introduction to analytics and marketing. And there was a new group at Roundy's, and we were able to use analytics to drive a bunch of value in the marketing decisions that they were making over there. Really focused around customer segmentation and customer targeting. And that's kind of when I really bought into customer-centric marketing.
Cool.
Products. It's really interesting. It's really interesting that a local grocer, a regional grocer, was sort of ahead of the curve, at least on the data side. How did, was there someone in management who was sort of spearheading that, or the marketing side? What got everybody to be data driven at a smaller regional supermarket?
Yeah, they had, there was a new CMO who came to Roundy's. His name was Don. Ooh, there were so many Dons there. Don Hamlin, I think. There was 3 Dons that were executives. So Don Hamlin came on, and he was a data-driven marketer. He'd come from Sears, I think. So when he came, he just kind of built the research and analytics team from the ground up. So he hired my boss, Earl Potter, who is an insanely smart guy. And now he's at Quad running analytics there. And then they brought on a few analysts and a manager, and that was it. And we kind of took off, kind of introduced the company to RFM segmentation and started targeting, our highly valuable customers and got them to come back more and more. And you're able to, decrease investment into low value customers and reinvest those dollars where they should go.
Yeah, and that's like the ultimate goal. And I think a lot of people don't even realize that you can unlock those cheat codes. And like as soon as you start getting those early wins, it just starts to explode as like, what else can we do with this? How else can we make this work? And like, I don't know what kind of margins grocery stores operate on, but if you can significantly increase your customer value, your lifetime value of your customer, and then not spend money on low value customer base, it probably really moves the needle, like not even a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. And you're just not right. Like you go from spending a bunch of money on general public offers where you're giving people dollars off of baskets. The data tells you, right, like it's not doing anything. The people who redeemed that offer were going to spend that amount anyways. So what you should do is target that offer to people who weren't going to spend that amount, and get them to spend those incremental dollars at your stores.
It seems so obvious, but there are so many brands who just sort of throw one offer or one sort of strategy at all of their customers and expect to see, metrics up and to the right. But, it's not the case. To your point, you're giving away margin if the folks who are going to buy milk, are going to buy milk anyway, and now they get it with a 10% off discount. How do you segment your customer base into folks who maybe were on the fence about buying it from your store and to get them to convert?
Yeah. And it sounds like easy and obvious, but it's really baby steps, right? Like a lot of marketers have been doing these things, and doing them based on their gut for so long that it's really on the analytics partners to incrementally show, hey, I can provide value here, and just keep gaining that trust.
Did you see a lot of initial friction from marketers?
Yeah, like I still see it. Like people want to go with their guts, because that's what they've been doing, and they trust their gut more than they trust the data sometimes. And sometimes, right, like rightfully so. Analytics partners provide an insight and it doesn't pan out, and then it's almost like when it happens, it's like trust is broken. So we got to start from scratch again.
We call that the shark attack paradox. It's like, shark attacks and ice cream sales is kind of a famous data set. It's like, if you want to stop shark attacks, you ban ice cream. And it's the wrong insight to derive, but they're one-to-one, perfectly correlated through every single metric, but it's, the wrong thing. And every now and again, people will see that as like, aha, I gotcha. This doesn't work. And it's like, no, it does. You found the wrong thing. Happened once.
Yeah.
And I guess I always crack up because, I feel like data folks have fewer lives than marketers. It's like you make one wrong move and you're out of there. But like marketers, it's like, well, this campaign didn't work. Oh no. But somehow they're forgiven, but somehow you guys have to start from scratch. So
yeah,
it's hard out there.
I think you're uniquely positioned because a lot of times we're seeing this more and more where data teams aren't fully integrated into marketing teams, or the data team doesn't have the domain knowledge required to give the right insights to that marketing team to get the better result, which leads the marketing team to maybe say, oh, well, we're getting crappy results because we have bad data. And it's like, no, the teams aren't talking together to have a common unified goal. But with your background, your business acumen, and your ability to be embedded in marketing orgs, I feel like you have some of that domain knowledge that allows you to get better results for your stakeholders, right?
Oh, that's huge. So at Roundy's, we were still, a little siloed. It's like you had the research and analytics team, then the marketing team. But at my next gig at Econolite, it was one team, right? Like we were in a small little building. There was like 12 of us. So everyone was talking to each other. And there, what I learned really quickly was communication's key. Especially when you're the only analyst working in this business and you're getting questions from supply chain folks, marketing folks, customer service folks, right? They'll send you an email and you will answer the question they asked. And you end up going back and forth, right? 5 times answering these slightly different questions that they ask. And really early on, I learned, man, we could have cut through all of that if we had a 15-minute conversation about what your problem was and what you really needed help with. I
feel a little attacked, Jake. It's fine because that's where Jake and I met at Econolite. I was on the marketing team. So it's fine. Okay.
No, I mean, it's crazy. Like and it just is how it is, right? That's why like ticketing systems can be so terrible sometimes. Like someone enters a ticket for a question they think is the question they want answered, but not really. And like, it's just the communication. Like you're almost like speaking two different languages, because they're talking business language and you're talking data language and analytics language. And so you really just got to get in a room sometimes and figure out what the problem is and address the problem, not necessarily answer a specific question.
It's interesting because like I think a lot of people, especially in the marketing world, they're like, oh gosh, AI is coming for all of our jobs, it's going to flatten us. But in reality, it puts you in a position if you can have the human interactions to get better results. It's just a tool to get better results. But if you don't have those human interactions, those things that are kind of uniquely human, then you still won't get those results. You can't just completely detach everything, put a ticketing system in and let the robots do it. Because again, like you might not be asking the right question to get at the outcome you're actually trying to get to. Whereas a conversation will expose that.
Yep.
And I feel like, Jake, you cut things off at the pass when I joined the marketing team and you were already on it and you got me in a room and you had like flashcards. I remember it. You're like, okay, here's how this works. And I was just like, oh my God. So I love that we were able to, like, you could speak my language. You were teaching me yours. And so from there, I felt like we were able to scale that marketing organization, make it more data driven, because you took the time, to your point, to have that conversation ahead of time and say, like, here are some problems that we need to solve. And then I felt comfortable coming to you, knowing that I, was new to that space, new to e-commerce for sure, new to data-driven marketing. I had come from the corporate world and the B2C world where you had endless budgets and no accountability. And so now when I went to an e-commerce business where you were responsible for a P&L, it was nice to have somebody who, was considered, I thought you were an asset, a huge asset to the team. And that's how teams should work together. And that's why I always didn't understand the friction, because I haven't really experienced it a ton, but I know it's definitely there.
Yeah.
Are you seeing that kind of friction in your new space, or is it more of a team effort?
Right. Like it's such a big organization that people have very specific roles. So I do see a little bit of that, but to be honest, like in my period, the marketing leaders, like they really appreciate data and analytics and what it can do. And they're really like, they didn't come from the analytics space, but they're very analytical thinkers. So I think that helps a lot. And I mean, like Lauren, you mentioned when you come on to kind of like analytics folks, just, I can't tell you how much they appreciate it when you get like a marketing person like yourself who just gets it. Like they understand how this can provide value. Right. Like I had to do a little bit of work, but you embraced it really early.
Oh yeah. Once I was like, oh my God. Well, so I was just so used to not seeing any results beyond like the vanity metrics. So once I realized like, oh my gosh, I'm responsible for revenue, like driving margin. It's like, I needed you to like help me be a better marketer. I couldn't have done it without you. And so that's when I really started to embrace it. And that's when, Derek and I started chatting and I was, singing your praises. And he was like, yeah, that's like the way. That's how all data people are. They're craving partnership and camaraderie with their departments for the most part. They often don't get it.
But when you have like inquisitive people that have a lot of, I wonder if, like, anytime you have an I wonder if statement, there's probably a great follow-up. Like I can work with the analytics team, I can work with the data team to answer that. It's like, we talked about this use case a lot. I think it was over lunch one time. We're like, man, I wonder if plain text email would perform as well as design. And it's just like, let's figure that out. Let's try it. Right.
Yeah.
Like anytime you have a wonder if statement, if you're truly inquisitive, Alex talked about this in the last episode. It was inquisitive people get really interesting results. Right. And if you're inquisitive and then you're willing to follow up on it, you can get really amazing results, especially if you have the right people to help answer those questions.
Yeah. Man, I know exactly what you're talking about. I remember what triggered that too. Simply Safe emails. We're all playing.
And Mac Weldon too. Mac Weldon emails went from fully designed to plain text. And I clicked on them every time. I was like, click. And I'm like, oh God, like I got completely got by somebody running an A/B test. And then I'm like, let's try that. That could be interesting.
Yeah. Well, this email signed off as Brie from Econolite. This must be real good.
Exactly.
Yeah, robot didn't make this at all.
No, it's totally organic. Do you think it's a trait of most data folks to be inquisitive? Do you think it's required in your job?
To be a good analytics person, I think it is. But it can't. It's right. It's not even like I think most analytics folks are inquisitive, but I'll go back to communication. Like you got to figure out what the problem is. And a lot of time, I think it is on the analyst to be reaching out and saying, "Hey, I know you asked for this. I know you asked to find out how many customers bought this last year, but what is the problem you're trying to solve? Because there might be a better way." Right? Because the strategy folks, they don't understand a lot of the times. They don't understand what analytics can do for them, and especially they don't even they don't understand the data that's available to them. And so it's really on you. I can't tell you how many times I've taken that and said, well, we have these other data points that I think might be really useful for solving that problem, and they didn't even know they were there.
Yeah. One of the first steps we've been doing these days is like, we're initially like, oh, you can do data as a service. It's really interesting. But if you don't start with what is your actual objective, not what you think the how is. Like, cause I think people are really good problem solvers. So they kind of jump to a how. And it's like, let's get behind that. What is your actual raw objective? Now let's build the strategy. Now let's talk about what we can actually accomplish and test to see if it helps you better. And then you get more of those what if questions that can spiral out of it. But that's the one problem with people is it's not bad, but people are really good problem solvers by nature. So they jump to a how without they kind of skip over the whole objective they're going for.
Yeah. And what's great about understanding the objective is, right, no matter what happens, you answer one question, three more come up. If you don't know the background of that objective, the analyst can't do that for you. So they're coming to you every time they answer one how, and you have to iterate 10 times before you get there.
Yeah. And you get a worse result every step along the way until you can get to the actual root cause.
Absolutely.
So what are the big use cases you guys are working on right now? Like, what are the big things that you're focusing on that you're seeing good traction with that are really interesting for you?
I mean, kind of the same stuff, just always trying to do a better job of identifying clusters of customers that are more engaged or different content works better with. That's really what's really interesting, and it's a constant challenge because that space is just always changing. You gotta keep up with the customers, and content preferences are always changing. Even channels of engagement, right? Like how me, I was a DM guy at Econolite, but that's all shifting from DM to email to now apps. You gotta stay where the customers are.
Yeah, it's like trying to solve a Rubik cube that's fighting against you the whole time, right?
Yeah.
What's a customer cohort that surprised you when you were looking at that? You were like, what? These people shop here this often? Or is it as expected?
I don't know if there's been a customer cohort that surprised me, but I will say that channels of it, I've seen it. Lauren, you know this really well, but there's been a channel that surprised me. And I was prospecting at Econolite again. Who would have thought that you could send a 50-year-old electrical contractor an email out of nowhere and engagement would skyrocket? And that's another thing that I think is important for an analytics professional. You can't have assumptions. Because if you have my assumptions are wrong more than they're right. And that was a program that I thought had no chance of working.
Yeah.
But I just knew what the data was telling me. It was telling me these are the correct customers, but you're not reaching them enough. How do you increase frequency really quickly? So email came up, and even though I didn't necessarily think that would work, I knew it was kind of the right approach. We got to figure out a channel to contact these guys really quickly, more often.
More cost effectively too.
We have that conversation with client base too. It's like a lot of people think about how would I react to this? How would I do that? And it's just like, you got to step outside yourself and I'm not my customer. I'm not the person I'm trying to reach. So I don't actually know that answer. And sometimes we drag race bets. We're like, well, what do you think? You think this is going to work or not? And we're wrong a lot of the time. But that's why you have to do A/B tests, holdout tests, and crazy stuff like that to see how much is my personal life experience and bias throwing off what my assumption is of the efficacy of this effort. It's kind of interesting.
And what I've seen more and more, especially from the executive team, it's like they have an assumption that X vehicle works or doesn't work. And then they want the data to sort of confirm what they believe to be true. And they'll twist that data, manipulate that data to reinforce their assumptions rather than just let the data do the talking. And so that's a challenge. It's like, that's the danger of data. It's like, if it's in the wrong hands, you can twist it, manipulate it to reinforce maybe the wrong narrative.
Yeah, they don't want to hear a different opinion. They want to hear their opinion in a different voice and then skew the data to be able to make that true, right? And it's
you see that too often.
I know.
For sure. No, back on that point though, like Lauren, you introduced me to like the agile approach, right? So, and I think that fits right in here because, people spend so much time and so many resources on this idea that they think is going to work. And then, 3 months later, you've done all this work and spent all this money and it flops, where like the agile approach is you're trying little things the whole way and seeing if it works and iterating over and over again to figure out what works instead of wasting all of those resources on something that's not going to pan out.
You make small survivable bets. So if 50% of them don't work, it doesn't matter, versus like one huge, expensive marketing campaign and plan based on your baked in gut assumptions that can just sink you if it goes wrong.
And that goes back to trust, right? It's like, well, okay, if we try this one little thing, show that it works, that's great. If one other thing fails, it wasn't disastrous and didn't destroy the marketing team's budget for the year. So for us, like on the marketing team, when we were at Econolyte, it was sort of born out of necessity. It's like we didn't have a ton of money to play with. So we wanted to take these little bets to prove to the executive team that yes, there are prospecting opportunities in email. There are prospecting opportunities on social. Electrical contractors also use Facebook and Instagram. Let's do a small test to show, but we couldn't blow the budget on it and then, run the risk of that not being true.
Yeah,
for sure. Not yet. Right. And the cool thing about that was those other channels scaled so much quicker and so much more cost efficiently than our traditional channels. Yeah. So that was a lot of fun. That's a good point though. Like, how long did we test that email prospecting strategy before we went all in?
I think it was just a few months, like maybe 3 months.
We tested it for 3 months at a time, but I think we ran 4 tests before we went all in. Mm-hmm. So it was an incrementally larger test, but yeah. And even that, right?
Small, and you're like, that looks like it worked. You scale it up, you're like, I think this is working. Then you take another big bite and you're like, this is it. This worked.
Mm-hmm. It's still working. We got to go for sure. And even that though, right? Like every year we'd go back and test, hey, is that still working?
Yeah.
Because it's just always changing and you gotta keep up.
Is TikTok a driver for you, Jake? Are you a TikToker these days?
I'm not a TikToker, no.
Okay. All right. I just didn't know if Kohl's was on TikTok.
They might be. They probably.
It's interesting because like I don't feel that old, but then I look at all the new tools that are kind of layering in behind Instagram and the age demographics, and it's like, oh gosh, like I'm super old now. It's really
like
weird.
We're gonna have to be those old peoples with profiles just to stay relevant in our jobs. It's like, oh no.
Yeah, and as soon as we join the platform, then all the cool kids will jump off of it. That's usually the
new one. Are you guys leveraging TikTok for NanoShop?
No, I don't know enough dances. I'm not coordinated, Jake. It's not. It's not going to work. For
probably not right. Like it's so young too. Maybe not the right audience for you guys.
I'm sure there's somebody on there in our space that's just crushing it, absolutely crushing it. Not our skill set. Probably not what we'll probably hire that person to be able to go crush it for us will be our goal. Speaking of tools, what tools are in your tool belt these days? I remember you use R, but like what other things are you using to get to the conclusions that you want to get to?
Yeah. Right. Like I've used R, I've done a little Python, lots of dashboarding stuff in Power BI and Tableau. There's also some cool like no code solutions. Derek, I know you guys are in that space at NanoShop, but tools like Alteryx or SPSS Modeler. I mean, right now I've really shifted from like that kind of a role to focusing on really more of a leadership role. I got a great team of 5. And really great examples at Kohl's for how to be a good leader. So I haven't been doing too much of the actual digging into the data the last 6 months, which I do miss sometimes, but it's been really exciting to kind of get more experience in that kind of leadership role.
Cool.
My team, they do a lot of like they use SAS, a lot of SQL, some Python, all of that stuff to kind of.
Cool. So what do you think the future is looking like in this space? Like we all believe and we think tomorrow is more connected than yesterday, right? I think that's not even a debatable fact at this point. More unified data sources. So what do you think the future of analytics looks like and marketing looks like as that marriage comes closer together?
Yeah, well, I think, like you say, coming closer together is key. I think, marketers that are going to perform really well going forward are going to have analytics ingrained into the team. It's not going to be a separate analytics team who answers questions we have sometimes. It's going to be just part of the culture. It's just data-driven marketing. And then, like I see that a lot at Kohl's, but your IT partners are huge too. They have to help get you the data that you need in the right available so you can use it. And I think that's historically during my career has been, definitely a spot of friction, between marketing and IT. So the closer those two groups come together, I think the better it's going to be.
Yeah, especially like being able to get clean data so you don't have to pre-process it. That gets as much. That puts you in a spot to get closer to near real-time analytics, which helps everybody. And that's what you mentioned it. That's what we're hype on the potential of what can happen when you build a true no-code platform where you can like drag, drop, and then just derive, right? Versus really needing to be super deep into doing all the connection and cleaning yourself, being able to automate at least some of it.
Yeah, right. Because 80% of analytics is data prep.
Yeah.
So if you can cut that down and get a higher percentage being the really high value insights findings, like that'll be awesome. Yeah. But it's been tough. So far, right? Some of those tools help, but you still got to do a lot of the ETL on the analytics side. So having great IT partners to help you out with that is huge.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. These are my 2 favorite questions. So I'll start with the first one. I know you're a podcast nerd like me and a book nerd like me. What podcast are you listening to? And what's the last book that you read?
All right. Podcast. I've been on a bit of a personal finance kick for the last year.
My love language.
Nice. So I listen to the Money Guy podcast quite a bit. What else? I listen to the Joe Rogan Experience periodically, depending on the guest.
You got to cherry pick. There are too many.
I know.
That dude pushes out crazy content, like 3 hours a pop and like 4 episodes a week.
We're barely hanging on doing this. Like we're barely surviving. I don't know how he does so many.
Every other week, 1 45-minute thing. I don't know how they push that much content out every single week. It's fascinating.
It's crazy, like how long too. Like you mentioned it, Derek. 3 hours. You talk to someone for 3 hours, but he's always got more questions.
Yeah,
he's a lot of psychedelics, maybe a lot of.
But even trying to keep up with a podcast, it's like that is a commitment of time. You put it at 2x and rip through it. It's tough. That is a commitment of time to try and go through all of them. But I'm like you. Like I chip away at, depending on who the guest is, watching through that.
Yeah, for sure. And let's see, books. I think the last book I'm reading right now. So I'm reading 1984 by Orwell.
Yeah.
So
very good book.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think you introduced me to that kind of genre. You recommended Anthem.
Oh yeah, it's a great book.
Well, back I've been reading.
You have to break up your dystopian novels, though. You can't go full dystopia because then usually your head explodes. So you need like a nice fiction, like flowery fiction book after that.
And then you see it everywhere in reality too. It's like you gotta walk away from it every now and again. We had the whole team read 1984 when we were building an IoT platform because it was collecting so much data. You had temperature, pressure, humidity, volatile organic compounds. You're doing people counting, people tracking. Drew Kohl, who we had on episode 1, he's working for a company that's doing some really wild stuff with IoT, analytics, people counting, facial tracking, stuff like that. And so, like, same story. It's like you need to be really benevolent when you're designing those systems so that, what happens when the generation after you and after them get their hands on these tools that you're creating. It's like you got to do it with good in mind.
Good intentions, right? All right, last question is, if you could have dinner with 25-year-old version of yourself, what would you say? What advice would you give 25-year-old Jake?
25-year-old Jake.
Yeah, what were you up to then? A few years out of college. What were you doing?
No good. I think we're just starting my new job at Econolyte. Let's see. I'd probably say, your career is a marathon, not a sprint. So just focus on keep learning, keep adding new skills. And, people a little further down the path for you, they might know a little more, but everyone's just trying to figure it out.
That's a good perspective.
And if you're not, if you're in a job where you know how to do it, everything with, without any issues, I don't know, that sounds kind of boring.
Go to the next job.
Yeah, exactly. Keep pushing, keep finding new challenges, and you'll get to where you want to go.
That's nice and motivational. That's a nice positive spin. I love it.
I like it.
All right, where can we find you, Jake? You got a LinkedIn?
Got a LinkedIn.
All right, that's where we'll push people to then.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, we really appreciate you taking the time. It was fun talking through the analytics side of things, fun hearing about where you came from, how you progressed, fun seeing that we're aligned on what the future looks like, more data, more connected, more integrated with marketing. At least we hope that's where it's going. And it's we love the podcast role that you set out there, and 1984 is, well, maybe back off the dystopian stuff for a little while.
Take a break.
Put something cheery in there.
Yeah. And then there's this podcast, Sound Bites, of course.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Oh my God, we didn't even pay you to say that. Like all of our other guests, you did that for
on
free.
Repeat on your Spotify playlist.
Yeah. No, I've been keeping up with you guys, with NanoChomp and the podcast, so I've seen all the episodes.
Awesome, thanks, man. We really appreciate it.
Good.
Yeah.
We have a fan. We got one, Derek.
Got one. Actually, I'm actually. It's funny. I was no one's gonna watch it except us, but it's actually got a lot more reach than I was expecting. So. Yeah, it's been fun. We've been having some fun conversations, and it's been really good. I'm excited for everyone we get a chance to chat with.
Yeah. Beautiful.
Well, thanks, Jake. Thank you so much for joining. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you guys. Great.
Thanks, Jake.
Great to be on here.
Really appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.